The year is 1834. The king is dead. In the suffocating quiet of the royal palace of Madrid, I, Dr. Francisco Flores, find my own breath has deserted me. The summons had been delivered in a panicked whisper, a breach of protocol that spoke volumes. Now I stand in the private chambers of the late Ferdinand VII, the air thick with the scent of myrrh, and the heavier, sweeter smell of mortality. My work as the royal physician was not finished. It was about to begin. The Queen Regent, Maria Cristina, stands before me, her face a porcelain mask of grief, but her eyes, dark and sharp, betray a terror that has nothing to do with widowhood. Her request, spoken so softly it is nearly consumed by the velvet drapes, chills my very soul. "You must preserve it, doctor," she breathes, a single tear tracing a path through her face powder. "For posterity, for science." I know she does not mean his heart or his brain. My hands tremble as I approach the grand bed where Ferdinand's body lies. Even in the stillness of death, the man who held Spain in a fist of iron for 2 decades seems to sneer from beyond the grave. But it is not his face, puffy and pale, that commands my attention. It is the secret that lies beneath the embroidered silk sheets. It is the thing that defined his reign as much as his absolute cruelty, his festering paranoia, or his casual betrayals. It is the anatomical monstrosity that court historians will only ever allude to in hushed, frightened whispers. As my fingers, betraying me with their tremor, reach for the sheet, my mind floods with the stories. The whispers in the palace corridors, the tales of custom-made cushions, of screaming royal brides, of desperate alchemical attempts to sire an heir against the brutal joke of nature. I am not merely preserving flesh and blood. I am being asked to embalm the physical evidence of a curse, the very embodiment of a reign that was itself deformed, oversized, and ultimately ruinous to everything and everyone it touched. To understand the man, you must first understand the poison in his blood. Ferdinand VII was born cursed, not by some gypsy's hex, but by the calamitous legacy of centuries of royal inbreeding. The Spanish Habsburgs and Bourbons, in their obsession with pure bloodlines, had spent generations weaving a genetic tapestry of ruin, marrying cousins to cousins, uncles to nieces. They had created a dynasty of walking nightmares, plagued by madness, infirmity, and deformity. Ferdinand, born at El Escorial Palace on a crisp October day in 1784, was the distilled essence of this royal decay. The son of the weak-willed Charles IV and Maria Luisa of Parma, themselves first cousins, he was a rigged gamble from the moment of conception. As the boy grew, it became hideously clear that nature had played its cruelest jest upon the future King of Spain. His member, the symbol of his manhood and dynastic duty, began to develop in ways that defied all medical understanding. By his adolescence, court physicians spoke in hushed tones of the royal anomaly, an organ so gargantuan and bizarrely shaped it seemed an alien appendage. One secret report, hidden for a century in the Vatican archives, described it with a chilling bluntness. The prince's organ resembles nothing so much as a billiards cue, thin as sealing wax at its base, thick as a man's fist at its extremity, and long enough to serve as a walking stick. In an age that revered the refined classical proportions of Greek statuary, Ferdinand was a grotesque. The very thing lesser men might envy became his profound, defining shame.
His childhood was a masterclass in dysfunction. He watched his father, Charles, abandon rule for the hunt, while his mother, Maria Luisa of Parma, flaunted her affair with the prime minister, Manuel de Godoy, the de facto ruler of Spain. Ferdinand absorbed these daily humiliations, learning bitter lessons about power, betrayal, and the folly of trust. But it was the mockery of his own body that forged the tyrant. He heard the giggles of servants, the coded jests of courtiers. This constant humiliation bred a deep, festering resentment. A young page who accidentally witnessed the prince changing clothes was not merely dismissed. Ferdinand had the boy flogged and his family exiled. The message was absolute. No one could see his shame and go unpunished.
In 1802, at the age of 18, Ferdinand was married to his cousin, the beautiful and intelligent Princess Maria Antonia of Naples. She arrived in Madrid with a heart full of romantic notions, eager to meet the prince they called El Deseado, the desired one. The wedding was a magnificent spectacle, the streets ringing with celebration. The first hint of the nightmare to come was a strange request from Ferdinand's valet to Maria Antonia's ladies-in-waiting. "Special preparations are needed for the royal bedchamber," he had said, his eyes refusing to meet theirs. Soon, custom-made cushions of velvet and horsehair were brought in, along with bottles of oils and strange, polished implements that looked more suited to a surgeon's table than a bridal suite. When Ferdinand finally entered the chamber that night, Maria Antonia's fairy tale shattered. Her first glimpse of her husband's naked form sent the scream tearing from her throat, a sound of pure animal terror. "Monster! Monster!" she cried, scrambling backwards against the wall, her eyes wide with horror. Witnesses later described the sight as a great club with a thin handle, a twisted, curving apparatus of flesh that broke her sheltered composure entirely. What followed was not a wedding night, but a clinical procedure. The physicians were summoned. The horrified, sobbing princess was instructed on what would be required of her. The cushions were arranged, the oils applied. The act itself was so traumatic that she was given laudanum to endure it, the beginning of an addiction that would consume her. Ferdinand, already consumed by his insecurities, saw only his wife's revulsion, a disgust that twisted his shame into a cold, cruel anger. Their attempts to produce an heir became a ritualized horror. Ferdinand would summon his physicians, Maria Antonia would be dosed with laudanum, the procedure would be performed. 2 pregnancies did miraculously occur, but both ended in devastating miscarriages. The court physicians wrote of the unusual stresses placed upon Her Majesty's delicate constitution, a euphemism for the brutal reality that her body could not sustain a pregnancy under such violent trauma. Ferdinand, incapable of empathy, showed no compassion. He accused her of sabotaging the pregnancies, of harboring secret liberal sympathies, of deliberately denying Spain an heir. His accusations destroyed what was left of her mind. She died in 1807, aged only 21, a death officially attributed to fever, but known to all in the palace as a death of despair. Ferdinand's second marriage, in 1816, was to another cousin, Maria Isabel of Portugal. Forewarned by whispers from other courts, she was not as naive as Maria Antonia, but no warning could prepare her for the reality. The wedding night was another disaster, a session of torture that left behind blood-stained sheets and a broken bride. Isabel never recovered. She developed a pronounced stutter and what the physicians termed hysterical episodes. Often, she would wake the palace with her screams, shrieking about the monster that haunted her dreams. Ferdinand's paranoia metastasized. He became convinced Isabel was conspiring with foreign powers, using her terror as an excuse to mock his royal dignity. He had her mail intercepted, her food tasted for poison. The royal bedchamber became a laboratory of perversion. Desperate for a solution, Ferdinand invited foreign anatomists and physicians to observe his intimate failures, turning his marriage bed into a grotesque medical theater. Isabel, subjected to this parade of leering clinical eyes, began to collapse. She became a living ghost, her 1,000-yard stare more frightening than her screams. In 1818, after 2 years of this hell, she too died of what was diplomatically termed nervous exhaustion. Ferdinand's reaction was not grief, but rage. He ordered multiple autopsies, convinced she had been murdered to prevent him from producing an heir. His grief was indistinguishable from his paranoia. The third wife was Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony, a pragmatic princess from a desperate family. She arrived in 1819 armed with her own medical devices and a clinical detachment. Their marriage was a series of scheduled, medically supervised encounters. Maria Josepha kept meticulous records of their attempts, noting techniques and outcomes, like a research scientist. This cold, clinical approach infuriated Ferdinand even more than his previous wife's terror.
For 10 years, the grim ritual continued, while outside the palace walls, Spain crumbled. The American colonies, one by one, declared independence, their revolutionary propaganda depicting Ferdinand as an impotent tyrant whose physical inadequacies mirrored his political failures. His most intimate shame had become a rallying cry for nations breaking free. Then, the unthinkable happened. In 1829, Maria Josepha became pregnant. The court exploded with a joy so desperate it was almost painful. Ferdinand became a frantic guardian, surrounding his wife with physicians and priests. But the curse would not be denied. In the 7th month, Maria Josepha went into premature labor. The delivery was a horror. The baby, a daughter, lived for only a few hours. 3 weeks later, Maria Josepha followed her child into death, succumbing to infection and despair. Ferdinand broke. He refused to allow their bodies to be buried, demanding his physicians perform resurrections. For a week, the palace stank of decay as the king raged against the finality of his failure. The plot twist of Ferdinand's life was not one of his own making, but a desperate gambit by his advisors. In late 1829, they arranged a 4th marriage to his niece, Maria Cristina of Naples. This time, there was a secret they kept from the king until the negotiations were complete. When Maria Cristina walked down the aisle, she was already visibly pregnant, carrying a child that could not possibly be Ferdinand's.
It was a farce that fooled no one, yet Ferdinand, in his bottomless desperation for an heir, embraced the lie. The birth of Isabella II in 1830 should have been a triumph. Instead, it was the beginning of a new, more poisonous chapter of paranoia. The king knew the child was not his blood, yet he had to champion the fiction of her legitimacy to save his dynasty. His relationship with Maria Cristina was built on this shared deception, a rotten foundation for a marriage. The final years of his reign were a descent into a madness that shocked even the most cynical courtiers. Consumed by the fraud he was perpetrating, Ferdinand's paranoia reached grotesque new heights. He had peepholes drilled into the walls between his chambers and his wife's, spending hours watching her like a demented voyeur. Servants would see the royal eye pressed against the plaster as the queen nursed her daughter or knelt in prayer. The court became a theater of mutual surveillance. Ministers were subjected to bizarre loyalty tests. Conversations were conducted in whispers. A careless word, a misplaced glance, could mean exile or death. Ferdinand's relationship with Isabella was a torturous contradiction. He loved her as his heir, but resented her as the living proof of his failure. He would stare at the infant for hours, searching her face for any resemblance to himself, commissioning portraits to compare against those of his wife's known associates from Naples. Food tasting rituals became elaborate ceremonies of suspicion, delaying meals for hours. He rotated his guards daily, convinced of conspiracies. His obsession drained the treasury, paying for spies and security systems while his people starved. Spain, once the envy of Europe, had become a laughingstock, its decline symbolized by a king whose private hell had become a public catastrophe.
His physical health crumbled under the psychological strain. He suffered from insomnia, digestive ailments, and a persistent tremor. His speeches became rambling, paranoid tirades. In 1833, the end came not with a bang, but a whimper. Ferdinand VII simply faded away, his body and mind finally succumbing to a lifetime of fighting his own flesh. The official cause was gout. The truth was exhaustion, physical, psychological, and spiritual. And so I stand here, in 1834, the Queen Regent's chilling words echoing in the chamber. With a deep breath that feels like a betrayal, I pull back the silk sheet. Even prepared, I gasp. The rumors, the whispers, the horrified accounts of his wives, they had all been understatements. It lies there, colossal and strangely inert, a testament to nature's capacity for cruelty. In my clinical examination, I find what decades of physicians had noted: the astounding length, nearly 14 inches, the bizarre variation in girth, the unnatural curvature. But I find something else, something no one had ever been allowed to see. The flesh is a roadmap of suffering, crisscrossed with the fine, silvery lines of old scars. They are not battle wounds. They are the marks of pathetic, desperate attempts at self-surgery, inflicted over decades with whatever secret tools a shamed prince could acquire. He had tried to carve himself into normalcy, and in doing so, had only added layers of physical and psychological trauma to his curse. The preserved organ, along with my detailed drawings, will be sealed and sent into the Vatican archives, a secret deemed too disturbing for public knowledge. Ferdinand's legacy is not in the stone and marble of Madrid, but in the fractured, broken Spain he leaves behind. His daughter, Isabella II, the product of his greatest deception, inherits a kingdom torn by civil war and humiliation. As I complete my grim task, I reflect on the terrible irony. Here lies the physical proof of a reign that consumed everything: wives, subjects, and ultimately, the king himself. This preserved flesh is more than a medical curiosity. It is a monument to the destructive power of shame, the corruption of unchecked authority, and the tragic, cascading consequences of one man's most intimate failure. The most perverted king in history has found his peace, but he has left a wound on the soul of his nation that will fester for generations. A grotesque inheritance from a man who was both a monster and, perhaps most tragically, a victim of his own blood.